Does anybody here, have you noticed that gasoline prices are going up? You noticed that just a little bit? What's the least amount that you can remember? Shout it out. The lowest price you can remember in your lifetime. 20 cents a gallon, all right? 19 cents. Boy, you got some white-haired folks here. That's been a while. I can remember back in the late 70s, early 80s when I was just, actually late 70s, I was high school with late 70s. I can remember pumping gas. How many of you guys pump gas in a full-service station? Remember those days? Fill her up, sir. Regular. What would you like? Back before we had unleaded, I had the thing on the belt, the cha-ching thing. Clean your windshield, check your oil, all that stuff. You don't find full service like that just about anywhere anymore. It's a lot of fun. Gasoline back then was around $1 a gallon, I guess. And I can remember it being, a little bit lower than that when I was a little younger. But I remember back in the early 70s, my dad was driving truck, and we had a big gasoline shortage. You remember that? Particularly up in the Northeast. We had a huge gasoline shortage and big lines, but Dad brought home a different story. Some of his trucker buddies were driving tankers out into the desert and dumping gasoline. Can you imagine that? Why would they do a thing like that? Well, there's all kinds of reasons for shortages. And we've heard some reasons from these stages before. Let's hear another side of the story. Let's hear from an expert, somebody who was right there and saw some things that'll blow your socks off. Please welcome to the stage, Lindsey Williams.
Hasn't this been a wonderful Quest Q2 event? The planning has been superb. Don't you think so? I have never seen a convention planned quite. The speakers, there's no such thing as a second-rate speaker. I mean, everybody here has been great. Quest, we appreciate you. God bless you, and thank you for the wonderful job you're doing. Someone asked me the other day, don't you think it's time to brush down the cobwebs and start all over again? And I said, brush down the cobwebs, I think it's time to kill the spider. Today you will hear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and I hope you go away from here knowing the rest of the story. If you have a pencil and paper, and I'm sure you do sitting there, please jot down one expression that will summarize everything that I'm going to say in the next hour and a half. The standard currency of the world is oil. It's not the American dollar. Neither is it the euro. It also is not the ruble. How did it begin with me? It began, may I put it this way, since I'm at Quest. My quest began in 1970. I was a missionary in the state of Alaska. I'd been a Baptist pastor for the past 12 years. When I arrived in Alaska, I heard that they were going to build the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline. That was that 800-mile, 4-foot diameter, largest pipe ever constructed on the face of the earth for the carrying of crude oil from the monstrous new oil find at Prudhoe Bay on the Arctic Ocean, where it goes to 130 below zero in the wintertime, and I've never understood why they can't find oil in a better place. But, and it wound up in Valdez, Alaska, and I heard that 25,000 pipeliners were going to converge on the state of Alaska to build that pipeline. 25,000 of the cussedest, drinkingest, orneriest folks on the face of the earth. What would you do if you were a missionary? The first thing that came to my mind was they must need some spiritual guidance. So I went to Alaska Pipeline Service Company and I said, don't you need a chaplain on the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline? They said, chaplain, we don't know what to do with you. Well, I guess persistence paid off. I kept going back and back. And finally they said, okay, we'll give you the northern 7 camps. I'm sure they thought I'd last about 3 months with those pipeliners, from Prudhoe Bay up on the Arctic Ocean, and they said down to Galbraith Lake, 7 work camps, go up there and see what you can do. Well, I did. I lasted 6 months and was still going good and having a great time. And Mr. R.H. King, personnel relations man, came to me one day with Alaska, and he said, Chaplain, you're saving us thousands of dollars of counseling fees that we aren't having to pay. It's amazing what attitude you're creating amongst the men in the work camps. And he said, we would like to offer you executive status. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, that means you can go any place you'd like to, see anything you want to see. We'll give you a vehicle, an executive pass. And he said, we would like to invite you to sit in on our board meetings in an advisory capacity in order to help the relationship between management and labor. Now, this had to have been the providence of God, because there is no possible way that a little insignificant, unknown aviation missionary could have been allowed in the meetings with men that come from the IMF, the World Bank, and the top oil company officials of the world. But for 3 years' time, I sat in their board meetings, and it changed my life. I will never be the same person again. If someone had asked me in 1970, Lindsey Williams, do you believe there's a group of people on the face of the earth who control the world? I would have said, who are you, a John Bircher? And I would have laughed at them. If someone had said to me in 1980, after I wrote my book, The Energy Non-Crisis, do you believe there's a group of people on the face of the earth who tell the president what to do, dictate to the Arabs what they'll give them for a barrel of oil on any given day, and tell Congress what bills to pass? I would have said, not only do I believe it, I sat and listened to them talk about it. I remember one night, I went back to my dorm room. I'd been with these people all morning. I had had breakfast with the International Secretary-Treasurer of Exxon. I had helped host an Arab sheikh that afternoon. I'd been with Mr. Ken Fromm, the senior executive of Atlantic Richfield, in a meeting that day. And I went back to my dorm room that night, and I laid down on my bed. Now, mind you, I had been accustomed to being amongst honest people, deacons, church members, people that lived a reputable life. I had never been thrown amongst a den of thieves before. And I remember I went back to my room that night. I laid down on my bed. I literally looked up at the ceiling and cried out to God. And I said, oh God, how can there be such dastardly people on the face of this earth that control nations, manipulate currencies, and tell people what to do? They said, we have a right to run the world. After all, those people out there, they don't have sense enough to direct their own destiny. Well, I have a message for them. You do have a right to your own destiny, and that's the reason you're at Quest today. Is that right? Well, I decided that someone more reputable than I had to see what I was seeing, because nobody would believe a little insignificant missionary. I had met him some years ago. His name was Senator Hugh Chance from the state of Colorado. A very outstanding, recognized gentleman. And I called him one day and I said, Hugh, I'll make all the arrangements. You must come to Prudhoe Bay. You've got to see what I'm seeing. He took me up on my offer. I made the arrangements with all the executives of Atlantic Richfield and BP. He came with their permission. Previously, it had been arranged for him to have interviews with them. And he came to Prudhoe Bay and spent 7 days as our guest. They showed him everything he wanted to see. They never denied him a thing. They took him to well sites. They showed him mock-ups of the field. They told him how much oil was there. I shall never forget the last day that Senator Hugh Chance was at Prudhoe Bay. He got me off in my dorm room by myself, and he said, Lindsey, I can hardly believe what I've seen and heard today. By the way, he writes the foreword to my book, The Energy Non-Crisis. It lends great credibility to the book because someone of his character had to have endorsed it. And he said, Lindsey, I can hardly believe what I've seen and heard this week. And I said, Hugh, what do you mean? He said, Lindsey, I was sitting in the Senate of the state of Colorado when the men came from Washington, D.C. to brief us as state senators as to the energy crisis. He said, what I have seen here this week, what I have been shown on this field, the amount of crude oil that is here, what I've been told by Mr. Ken Fromm and the executives of BP, he said, I have come to realize that almost everything that I was told in that top-level federal briefing as I sat as a senator in the Senate of the state of Colorado, that almost everything that I was told was the exact opposite of what the truth is. He said, I was intentionally misbriefed. I was lied to. He writes that in the foreword to my book, The Energy Non-Crisis.